This is going to be our teaser. We're going to do the 1943. We're actually going to do these in reverse order.
Exactly.
We're going to start with 1944 and go to 1933. And so
43.
I'm going to throw this out there real fast. And wait a minute. It's actually tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes, is D-Day.
Okay, so for all of our listeners, if you've already given it away. I was going to make it and see how many got it because
how do you not know D-Day June 6th? Come on now.
Yeah, but you've got to
realize. They still teach it in schools these days, don't they?
No.
I hope. JP,
I don't believe they do. JP, do they still teach it in school?
We weren't sure. We know we've changed history over the last couple of years. It depends on which school district you're in, but in Texas school districts.
We're going to do another show somewhere in the future where we just rant about the failures, the simple failure to teach civics. And I'm seeing this more and more from people. Let's get back to being Americans. You know, if you want respect, you have to earn it.
Yep.
You have to give it.
Well, I like it. I don't know, but I like it.
We had noises going on.
I like it.
Yeah. But anyway, we're not going to do that. We want to honor the greatest. And as a Marine, sometimes it chokes me up to say this. But it is a fact.
You get choked up, Chuck? Come on.
On occasion. I have been known to do that.
I've never seen that on the show once.
I have been known on occasion to howl at the moon, and bonus points if you can name where that movie comes from.
Well, totally. I can, but probably not appropriate for this segment.
No, it would be, you got the wrong movie then, although it has nothing to do with the military.
Yep.
Bull Durham. On occasion, I have been known to howl at the moon.
All right.
The one thing Kevin Costner does extremely well, or two things really, baseball movies and westerns.
Yeah.
He does those really, really well. He has done 3 of the absolute iconic baseball movies, although I will be honest, the most popular was Field of Dreams, and I thought it was hokey. But Bull Durham and For Love of the Game, 2 outstanding baseball movies. And face it, Field of Dreams, I didn't care for it, but it is a great baseball movie. Oh, don't even go there.
Yeah. But hey, you know, don't forget, for me as a golfer, Tin Cup.
Yes, indeed. Tin Cup, one of the great sports movies, based on a book by Dan Jenkins, although it completely went away from the storyline of the book, but that was okay because if you know the late, great Dan Jenkins, you know that he was rather irreverent, which is why he fits so well on this show. Exactly. And so we have now completely gone off on a tangent. Sorry about that. That one was completely my fault. But let's talk about tomorrow will be the anniversary of the greatest amphibious invasion in the history of the world.
And I got to throw a little fun jab at this one.
And obviously D-Day, so you missed your cue.
But what service branch was not part of the greatest amphibious landing, which their whole purpose is about amphibious landing?
I beg to differ with you.
The Marines were there?
Absolutely.
Where were they?
The Marines were always there. The Marines were part of the staff. In fact, the invasion would have gone a lot better if they'd listened more to the Marines.
Did not know that.
Yep.
I like that. Good. No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Marines were, in fact, consulted on that.
Very cool.
Now, what did they now? Since you want to go there, since he wants to throw the gauntlet down,
I'm good with it.
And let's throw up that iconic picture, JP, if you will, that one that is shot from the inside of a Higgins boat.
I know.
Okay.
And there's our donuts.
Oh, there we go. Oh,
and there's a doughboy. Oh, look at that.
Oh,
Who did his homework?
Perfect.
Who did his homework? That's right.
Did you call for the picture to come up? No, you didn't.
Fine.
Yet a failure refuses
Another
to take
doughboy
responsibility
helmet.
for his own action.
Multiple doughboy helmets.
And there we go with the Salvation Army. So big shout out to the Salvation Army for what you have done. Okay, let's go one more slide in. And we'll come back to this one. This one will become very important. One more. There was a picture taken. It is one of the most famous pictures.
For the inside of the Higgins boat.
Talking about his last picture.
I have no idea what the order is. I didn't look at it.
I'm so used to you, Chuck.
I know.
I
put things in order.
There we go.
There we go.
Arguably probably one of the most iconic photos of D-Day.
Okay. So you think that this was an extremely important photo, and you think the Higgins boat had played a vital role in this invasion? And you wonder where the Marines are without the Marine Corps, specifically without General Brute Krulak. Great story. He was, in fact, significant in getting down to talk to Mr. Higgins to explain what we needed and what the Marines were going to be doing in the Pacific. And this was actually before. Much of this started before World War II was declared. But we had already figured out how we were going to fight the war in the Pacific. But without these crafts, that the Marine Corps brought to the military, you don't have an amphibious invasion.
Dropping knowledge warheads
left and
on
right.
foreheads.
Yeah.
There you go.
They referred to Ike Krulak as Brute Krulak. He was a truly iconic general. He wound up writing an autobiography. Yes, I do have a signed copy of it.
Shocking.
But I will say this.
Is it a first edition?
You know what? I'll have to check on that one.
Chuck, you're slacking here. Not a first edition.
Slacking.
Usually it's always a first edition autographed copy.
Well, I have a lot of
them. Library of Congress in the house.
At the house. But the one thing that I will say, if you want to read a better book, and it was Brute is the name of the book, and it is the life story of General Krulak, whose son, who would make you look tall, would eventually become Commandant of the Marine Corps. Yeah, and an absolute fabulous man. Charles Krulak is Commandant Krulak, sir, as I call him.
Was he your commandant when you were in, or?
No. He was, believe he was after me. Yes, he was after me because he's not that old. But anyway, let's get back to D-Day and World War II. So, JP, if you'll roll backwards a couple of slides, and we'll do that first map.
As JP's doing that, we'll talk about map. You got to let's kind of paint the picture a little bit. World War II. This was after we had already taken Africa. We had started making some progress, but we knew.
We had taken Sicily back. We had landed on Anzio Beach. But
Germany
one of the things they realized was that fighting up, and if we had a map, and this map isn't quite large enough, we realized fighting up from the south, from Italy, was going to take forever.
Exactly.
And the geography was absolutely horrible for offensive operations. It was great for defensive operations. And the battles in Italy, not so much in Sicily, but the battles in Italy were absolutely...
Anzio was a great example. I mean, a bloodbath there. Yeah. I mean, it was just...
The Army was lucky to pull that one off.
It was a slugfest.
Yeah.
And Hitler... knowing, that the Allies would be attacking us, though he did not know where. He assumed they were going to attack over at Calais.
Okay, you just totally flew off on another tangent.
Well, I did fly off on another tangent.
We're setting the stage.
Right.
And so one of the things that's important...
We got to stop
looking at the map. Let's go. We've got another map that'll show
a little bit more
what
detail.
Andrew is talking about. So basically what had happened is the decision was made that we are going to have to invade France.
Yep.
All right, we're not going to get there on this, but we'll try to paint... in the small map on the bottom where Britain is labeled, you will see to the bottom right-hand side of Britain is a fairly narrow channel, a fairly narrow portion of the English Channel. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't say that right. And that is Calais, that Andrew, my partner in crime here, was just referring to. And so Hitler assumed, and the generals assumed, that was where they would make their crossing.
And it made the most tactical sense at the time. But here's where it gets very interesting, and we were talking about prior to the show, is we all know the story of D-Day, or the main meat and potatoes of it, but the parts that made it so successful was we took, at that time, our most successful general, the one that's feared most by Hitler and Germans, George S. Patton. And we created what was called the Hollywood Army.
Yes,
and this is really super cool stuff.
Yep.
It's almost one of those things like, did they really do that? The answer is, yes, we did. We took Hollywood studios and producers over to England, and we made the largest army out of inflatable rafts, cardboard cutouts to look. So when the Germans flew their spy planes over, to think that we were
They
going
weren't
to
just inflatable rafts; they were actual inflatable
both tanks. Some of them, I mean,
you can actually push it over just by leaning up against
there's
it.
video
Way. That's
images
hilarious.
of we allowed the German spy planes to fly over with very little resistance just to give it the enough of an effect that we were trying to protect our interest. And we would always have Patton there on speaking campaigns and tours, raising war bonds and whatnot to increase interest. The Germans were convinced, but one German was not. Do you know who that one German general that was not?
I'm going to guess Rommel.
Yes, that is correct. And do you know why?
No idea why.
Because him and
Besides the
Patton,
fact that he was brilliant.
he was brilliant, but him and Patton respected and knew each other so well. He was like, "There's no way Patton would do this because he knows that's what I would have done."
Oh, absolutely. The famous scene in the movie Patton, where Patton defeats Rommel in North Africa. Yep. You magnificent bastard! I read your book.
Yep. And it was that mutual respect of tactician on both sides.
Yep.
And Pat and Rommel, Hitler, a little bit of an egomaniac,
A little bit.
would not
We
listen
should
to Rommel.
be thankful he was such an egomaniac.
Absolutely. He was 100% convinced that Rommel was off his rocker. There's no way would he do that. This makes too much sense. And Rommel's like, you don't understand.
Keep in mind, I was watching a special, and it's interesting. As much as the deception was incredibly important, keep in mind the Atlantic Wall that Hitler had built.
Yeah.
This massive construction problem extended from the northern coast of Spain on the French border,
Yep.
not into Spain, but on the French side, all the way through Norway.
Yep.
So he was ready for us to come anywhere. So Eisenhower wound up choosing what would be, and it doesn't show it as well on this map. Well, you can see it again in this small map that shows Britain. You can see the area, the boxed area of the larger map, and you can see that this is one of the longest areas that we had to cross.
Yep.
But as any good Marine knows, the Marines were going literally hundreds of miles. That was the difference of about 20 miles.
It's only 90 miles, was it, from...
Wasn't far.
Yeah.
It wasn't that far. But the other problem with that is because it was such a small area, once you start moving, it's extremely hard to hide what you're doing.
Exactly. And when you saw the Armada, and it was an Armada...
the largest Armada ever assembled.
...that we sent over there, it all goes back to military deception of convincing the Germans that's where we were going to attack. And we had a radio announcer that was a French spy that was broadcasting messages to the German military all throughout the invasion. Ignore Normandy. Ignore Normandy. That is not where the attack is. That is a diversion to pull you away from, Calais. And Hitler bought that hook, line, and sinker. And because the German outpost over in Calais was like, where are they? You're telling me they're on their way. And he's like, I see them. I got eyes on them. They're coming. They're coming. They're coming. Maintained all the... By the time the Germans realized the Rouge, it was too late. Yep. It was absolutely...
Well, actually, it wasn't.
Well, it was too late to stop the landing.
But one of the things, and again, when we were talking about Hitler being a narcissist, and one of the things that was incredibly important that worked in our behalf was that they were afraid to wake Hitler up. Mm-hmm. So it was 9:30 or 10 o'clock before Hitler gave the order to release the armor in reserve. Yep. Had they done that as soon as they knew the landing was coming to Normandy,
it could have been a very different day.
Literally, and I'm gonna come to that because we're gonna have another little tidbit. We're gonna tell a few of the wars within the wars stories of a man named Frank Denius who single-handedly may have saved the landing at
Juneau, Omaha.
It was probably Omaha Beach because he was with the Americans. And I've teed it up. Let me go ahead and start that. We were talking about the armor coming. So eventually the armor was in fact released, but by this time the Americans had gotten ashore, and he was a staff sergeant he was a sergeant at the time. He got promoted to staff sergeant after this incident and would come home as a first lieutenant. We were talking about our universities. He is a very big deal, or was. He has passed away, but an absolutely great man. But he was on top of a hill with about a squad of Army dudes, and he was the artillery spotter. And he wound up calling in such effective artillery fire on top of this hill. And the weird thing was the Germans were looking for him. They knew he was out there somewhere. They couldn't find him. He'd ordered his guys not to shoot unless they spot us. And they were basically defenseless, calling in artillery. And he stopped a column of German tanks that if that column of tanks had gotten by, that section of beach would have been lost. Because there was nothing that we were bringing ashore that would have done anything to stop armor. And naval artillery, it was one of the disagreements where I didn't listen to his Marines, but they were worried about the fire being danger close. And basically so close that they would lose as many Americans as they took out Germans. But because of that, and he would earn his first, would wind up being his first of 4 Silver Stars.
And just like the Battle of Okinawa, unbelievable amount of courage and gallantry on the beaches of France.
So let's talk about 2 movies.
Yeah.
First of which is, and Andrew and I tend to, sometimes I think some of our listeners think we embellish a little bit. But I would ask anybody here who has not seen the opening 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, if you want to know what that beach was like. Now, not all the beaches were like that.
No.
The Americans got hit the hardest. And then if you go further down to
Juno and Sword were relatively
calm.
Yeah, not much happened. The Americans
and a lot of that had to do with the geography.
Yep.
So as you go to the east on the map and you see Juno and Gold and Sword, that tended to be very flat land, whereas the Americans were landing at Utah and Omaha.
And don't forget, the Rangers climbing Point du Hoc.
We're going to come to that. We're going to come to that. And again, another incredible example of personal courage. But Utah and Omaha Beach were fighting up against cliffs that were very well dug in and very well defended. So the fighting, and don't get us wrong, Juno and Sword were not some day at some picnic on the beach by any means, but the intensity of fire,
speaking,
it was all very relative. So the inability for the Germans to bring armor into play, and this goes back to the deception. They were also still worried that all of this was this massive decoy, which we have done before. We would actually do in the Gulf War. We would use the Marines. We would use the Marines as a decoy, and they thought Marines were going to land and do their traditional assault, and it was just a feint that kept them off guard. So very much a lot of this is trying to keep people off guard so that we can get a toehold. But speaking of toeholds, let's tell the Point du Hoc story.
Point du Hoc, the 2nd Ranger Battalion.
You can see it sits right between Utah and Omaha Beach.
Arguably, I think you can make a very fair argument that was hands down the bloodiest, hardest piece of land to occupy during that invasion, Point du Hoc, for multiple reasons. One, there was no beach to actually land on. They had to fire catapults fired off of specially configured rockets to send up the cliffside to climb these unbelievably...
They had hooks on the end of them that would literally grab on.
To the rock.
They were climbing up rope. There
weren't
even ladders. Weren't they going hand over hand with
they
just
were like knots on. They configured. There was a British mountain commando that taught them these tactics. They called them the GOAT.
Yep.
And
so if you can see where Point du Hoc is.
It's a small little area, but it had 3 cannon artillery pieces that could hit anywhere on the beaches of Normandy.
And do you know the grand irony of all of this?
What's that?
The artillery pieces had already been abandoned.
I thought they were going to tell me something else, but yes, that is true.
But the incredible courage, and it's not like that part of the beach wasn't still defended.
Oh, it was heavily defended. Casualties were extreme. Out of the nearly 194 Rangers that climbed, I believe only 75 made it to the top.
Wow.
That's heavy casualties for that unit. To take that area was literally blood, sweat, and tears.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, like I said, arguably, I think can be made the toughest small piece of land to occupy was probably Pointe du Hoc. That day, it was brutal, fighting all the way through. Again, Utah, Omaha Beach, they were massive. The first wave with the 29th Infantry Division, they lost 90% of their unit right away. 90% of the men of that unit never landed on the beach. They were done down.
And at this point in time, I have to do a personal shout out. He has passed away now.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were
I was very involved. So one of the gentlemen that was actually his squad, and his squad leader was Elmo Burfiend. And Bill, God, his name just flew right out of my head. Bill was one of his best friends.
Yep, we talked about on the show a couple times.
But he was part of the 29th. And the interesting thing is, 29th, when they landed, and actually that map isn't quite large enough to show it. So we were talking about World War I and the Doughnuts. Mm-hmm. And so when the Americans had landed the first time in World War I in France, they actually were able to land in the docks. But at this point in time, all of France was occupied by Germany. The 29th Infantry Division would be the only division that would turn west. And their role was to capture the three major St. Nazaire, I don't remember the other name of the port, and then the port of Brest. And we've talked about the story about the Battle of Brest. It was this massive old-style fort. It had originally, they stopped using it as an old, what period would that be, when forts were being built? But they were using it as the French Naval Academy version of the Naval Academy.
Did not know that.
The Germans had occupied that. The German general had sworn. The other two ports, the Germans just flat surrendered before the U.S. troops even got there. They realized that they were cut off. There was no way out. They were blockaded from the sea, and they just surrendered. But the German commander at Brest said, no, we're going to fight to the last man. And so they were beginning the assault in late September or early October. And it was very foggy morning, so they kept holding the assault because nobody could see. It was like, hey, let's...
And if you've ever been to that part of France at that time of year,
it gets foggy.
It gets foggy, which also kind of, and I know I'm going off on a little bit on stuff, but the fog of war is very crucial to remember what was going on.
Oh, my gosh. D-Day was such an incredible example of the fog of war. But to finish the story of the Battle of Brest, oddly enough, as the fog starts to clear, they see... several Germans stationed along what would be the front, all standing with white flags. And the commander had finally just said, nope, I love these men. I'm not going to sacrifice their lives for what is obviously a lost cause. And it was the first time the Americans realized that the war, it was one of those, you knew the war was over. It's just how long is it going to take the Germans to figure it out? And the odd thing was, had Hitler sued for peace at that point in time, basically after France was lost, he probably would have saved Germany as we know it because the Russians wouldn't have been able to roll in.
That excellent point on that.
So, and we're going off a little bit on the tangents.
But we're talking about it, but we got to also make sure we cover this. So much to cover here about D-Day. I mean, the event.
Just an incredible event.
I mean, if you
come
ever
on, Mr.
see,
Stat, how many people were involved?
I have that stat right here.
He's got to look it up because once again he's unprepared for the vote.
No, it's not prepared.
We landed over 600,000 troops in D-Day, D+1, D+2, D+3.
On the actual battle itself, of there, 156,000 American troops hit the beach that morning.
On that first day.
On that first day. A total of 195,700 naval personnel were involved with the landing, artillery, what do you call beach masters, which those guys played a massive role. Very underrated. People don't realize the role that the Beachmasters played in there. And do you want to talk a little bit about what a Beachmaster is?
Okay, so what the Beachmasters do is they control the beach. And we were just talking about the fog of war, but imagine you're landing, even if you're landing after the beach has been relatively secured, you're still taking artillery fire. The fighting has not stopped, but the incredible chaos, and you're looking up and there aren't road maps. There wasn't GPS back then. You had no idea where anything was. In fact, that becomes very important in the next part of this that we'll tell. Because we haven't even begun to talk about the airborne landings yet.
Gonna get into those guys.
And that's another incredible story of heroism by itself. But the Beachmasters actually have the authority that nobody outside of their direct chain of command can give them an order. The general can come ashore, and the Beachmaster says, "No, sir, you're going over here. Nope. I don't care what you think." The Beachmasters have absolute authority on the beach, but the incredible level of coordination. Now, when we deployed with a battalion. Each one of the beaches at Normandy had a division. So you have basically 3 battalions in a regiment and 3 regiments in a division. Kind of how the Marine Corps is structured. The Army is heavier than that, so it's even larger. Each one of those beaches had at least 1 division of troops. So to imagine as difficult it was when we would rehearse an amphibious landing with just a battalion, 1 squadron or reinforced squadron of helicopters.
They didn't have helicopters on D-Day.
They had not quite been invented yet.
Yep.
But boy, they sure could have used them. It did not take long for helicopters to become a vital part of our military. But we segue again. But the Beachmasters have an incredible role. A lot of them went 2, 3, 4 days without sleep. They were constantly in demand, getting everything set up, getting everything coming in. Because the thing was, it wasn't just that we had to make the landing. We had to land enough troops, had to land enough tanks, had to land enough equipment to stave off what obviously was going to come, and that was a massive German counterattack.
Exactly, and keep in mind, while the days following, or June 6th was a bloody, brutal day, the days following were no picnic either. The Battle of the Hedgerows was incredibly intense fighting with the Germans. I mean, if you've ever been, have you been to that part of France?
I have not.
That
is on the bucket list.
JP, is the RV amphibious? Can we? Not yet. We're going to work on that.
We're going to. Well, we may have to rent an RV when we go over.
Yeah, go over there.
Yeah, but that is absolutely a bucket list item. Is to tour the beach of Normandy, to go to see the French cemeteries and to drink from the fountain.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And like I said, the fighting didn't end on the beach.
No.
It went on and on.
We would be fighting hard until May of 1945.
And it was a slugfest. The Americans, took that beach. We earned that beach. And when you're talking about movies, while the opening scene of Private Ryan is about as close to what D-Day possibly could have been depicted on film, there's also another movie, I don't know, I think it's a French movie that shows a German perspective of D-Day. I've seen it on one of the
You know what's interesting? I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen the trailer to it. We've got to get a copy of that. Because what happened, and I want to say incredible. The guy who shot it was an Argentine gentleman.
Was the
producer? I don't know.
An Argentinian gentleman following the German. What are the odds?
What are the odds of that happening? But it was D-Day shot from the perspective of a German soldier. Yeah. And the trailer of it alone, I have never been able to find the title of that movie.
I've seen it, and it's
just an incredible, an incredible movie. And to take it another comparison to 2 outstanding movies that Clint Eastwood did was Flags of Our Father
and Letters of Iwo Jima.
And then Letters of Iwo Jima. And Letters from Iwo Jima is written from the standpoint of the Japanese soldiers there and trying to get an understanding of how their world worked. What their mindset was. And that was something, again, we're a little bit off on a tangent. We're still hearing the debates about whether they should have dropped the atomic bomb. And I think our listeners will appreciate this comment for the most part. I've got to ask people who even contemplate that, Are you just stupid?
I mean, the
Do
amount
you
of
not
lives saved on
understand
both sides.
the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War was Okinawa, which wound up being the last battle of the Pacific War. The Japanese were preparing to defend their homeland.
To the very last man, woman, and child.
Literally. They were everybody to the point of sharpening sticks to use as spears. It was amazing the level of ferocity that the Japanese people were willing to defend their homeland with. And I've heard people say, oh, yeah, we could have firebombed them into submission. Has there ever been a greater failure on the planet than strategic bombing to bring another country to its knees? It's never happened, folks. Nope. You look at the Battle of Britain. All it does is piss people off.
Yep.
I understand the tactical reasons for it, but let's just use some simple numbers. U.S. casualties were predicted if we invaded Japan.
Over a million.
No, ours were at least 250,000.
All right.
We would have killed at least 1 million, if not more, Japanese before they were finally willing to surrender. And it's doubtful that they would have ever surrendered. In both atomic bomb explosions, we lost 175,000 people. We actually killed more people firebombing Tokyo in one night than we did with those two atomic bomb blasts. And people say, oh, well, we shouldn't have done that. Why not? Why do we want to kill more people? We needed something that showed them, and they weren't even willing to surrender after the first bomb.
Nope.
It was after the second, it was like, okay, because they knew the next bomb was hitting Tokyo. What they didn't know is the next bomb was still being built.
Yep.
and we didn't have a third bomb to drop.
But they did not know that.
Be that as it may, when you strictly look at it in terms of loss of life, you've got the option of losing 1.5 million people versus less than 200,000. That is an easy decision.
It's a hard decision, but it's
neither one of these are
but it's
good
more importantly,
decisions.
The right decision.
It was absolutely the right decision. And it actually led to Japan coming back much faster. When you look at what we did to Germany. Now, I have been to Germany.
Yep, same here.
And again, a little bit of a tangent. But we're going to talk about, since we were talking about bombing, and then we'll jump back into D-Day because there's so many fascinating stories. Yeah. We haven't even begun to tell the story of the Airborne. And so we're going to come back to that. But what was amazing, I was looking around the city, and that part of Germany is very mountainous. It's down near the German part of the house. Stuttgart.
Stuttgart, yeah. I was over in Holmesfeld in Nuremberg.
Okay.
Been to the courtroom.
Oh, you see, we didn't get to do that. We didn't have enough time to do everything we wanted to do. And this was more my wife's trip. So we did the castles. We did Crazy Ludwig's Castle and all that. We'll do another show on that. But I'm looking around the city of Stuttgart, and I remember where we were, but we had a great view. And there were these mountains that were very geometrically symmetrical, which doesn't occur in nature. And I'm looking around going, what in the world is this? What they had done, and we drove up to one of them, what they had done is that was where they piled all the rubble. And into this, they put air vents to let the decomposition of all the stuff that was in there escape into the air. I mean, and these are 500-600 feet tall, but they had literally piled all the rubble of all the buildings that we destroyed, and then we had to rebuild. And it is absolutely a gorgeous city. But it was absolutely amazing. And people would use them, and they would hike up them, and they had pathways cut into them. But they were all over the place. And it was thinking about how much we destroyed the city of Stuttgart. But an absolutely incredible, and then one other, and I'm segueing off a segue, but I will say this: if you were ever there, the Mercedes Museum is literally the coolest auto museum. Even if you're not a big auto fan,
it's pretty neat too.
But the coolest story is: do you know who Mercedes is? Because it's Daimler Benz, are the two gentlemen who formed the partnership. Do you know who Mercedes was?
I do not.
His darling daughter is who he named his race car after.
I did not
Mercedes,
know that.
the Benz part of it was known for their race cars, and Damier was, I believe, known for building engines, and they formed a partnership, and literally, probably to this day, still build the best car in the world. Although the Japanese have certainly give them now a good run for their money. But it was an incredible museum. So anyway, to get off of that crazy segue, and it's flashing pictures. My wife is listening, and we will immediately go off on a half-hour tangent about our trip to Germany and incredible events. I'm going to do one where we're going to bring in some of the pictures to show the audience and talk about just some of the cool things. So an incredible country, because I did get to spend time at the Eagle's Nest.
I was about to ask you.
Spend some time in Birch's Gardens, and it is very, very interesting. But
that was a birthday gift to him.
Yes, it was. So yeah, I've been in that. I've been in the gold elevator. We got pictures standing in the massive fireplace at the top. Just an incredible place. An 800-foot sheer cliff that it is built into the side of, or built on top of. Excuse me. It's at the very top. So an incredible. We'll talk about that later. There is, and probably, if Saving Private Ryan is not the finest war movie ever made, and then the miniseries Band of Brothers is right there with it, and it tells the story of
the
Easy
connection,
Company.
Tom Hanks, Spielberg on both.
Yeah, it's just two incredible movie producers, brilliant minds. They do such incredible work. It was funny. I was driving in this morning. Tom Hanks did a passion project, and it was called That Thing You Do. And I'm completely off on a tangent here. It's one of those funny, feel-good movies. There's no swearing in it. There's no nudity. But there is a character in it, Guy Paxton. Mm-hmm. No, what was Guy's name? Patterson. Guy Patterson. And my son got a chance to play with the Frisco Orchestra. We did a trip to Branson, and they got to play with the Liverpool Legends, who coincidentally are in town this month doing a show down at the Grand Prairie Theater. And the Liverpool Legends is quite obviously a Beatles cover band. Mm-hmm. I promise we're going to get to the Airborne story here in just a second. But so he's up on stage, and I can say nothing but great things. Not only were they great performers, but they treated those kids so well. The orchestra got up. They got to do a couple Beatles songs with them. It was an incredible connection because I'd realized at the time the Beatles are 50 years ago. I mean, this is ancient history for these kids. And they know some of the music, but they don't know a lot of it, but they don't really know the story. So it was absolutely a cool experience. But there's a scene in the movie where Guy Patterson is the drummer of the band. And as he said, the drummer keeps the band together. He keeps the rhythm, and he keeps everybody together. But Hanks walks over to him at one point as they're getting ready to do one of their first shows, puts on a pair of Ray-Ban Wayfarers, and says, "You look good in this." And of course, Kathy has heard this line before, because the other thing he says is they come out and they all do the matching suits, and no matter what color it is, have I told you guys how great you look in red or in gold or in blue? And I would say that to her, and she'd look at me and she'd go, "What?" Anyway, Travis went up on stage in his Wayfarers as a tribute to Guy Patterson. So, sorry, completely segued, was thinking about my son. But let's come back to the Band of Brothers. If you have not watched this miniseries, it was the first Blu-ray that I bought, specifically to get a Blu-ray player.
And if you're going to get one, that's the one to get.
That's the one to get. And they do it pretty much every Memorial Day and Veterans Day. History Channel or somebody will reshow. HBO has it on all the time. We'll reshow it. It is 8 or 10 episodes long. 10 episodes long. And literally it tells Steve Ambrose's story. And if you don't know who Steve Ambrose with, he was the company commander of Easy Company.
No. So, Steve Ambrose was the company commander of Easy Company.
Who was he?
Dick Winters was the company commander.
Excuse me, you were absolutely right.
Yep.
You were my apologies to Dick
Steve
Winters.
Ambrose was the author of the book, Band of Brothers.
Wasn't he with?
He collected all the stories.
Ah.
Yep.
So, yeah, it is built off, and one of the best books I do not have an autographed copy of that, unfortunately.
If someone on a family member of Band of Brothers out there, the Library of Congress 2, otherwise known as Chuck's Library, he's searching for one. He will pay top dollar for that.
I have a copy of the book, but I don't have any of it autographed.
He needs a first edition autograph to complete his collection. So
it was such a great collection of, because the other book that he wrote was Citizen Soldiers.
Yep.
And Ambrose was such an incredible storyteller, and it's just very much a citizen army. These were not professional soldiers.
None.
And I've had an interesting conversation. We had wanted to get our friend J.P. Hogan on the show today, but he's down in Houston, unfortunately. And he is an incredible retired Army colonel, but also an incredible historian, especially when it comes to World War II.
And
Normandy. Specifically on D-Day and Normandy. And we'll have him on, and we'll talk about the next time that they've got a tour set up, because it's absolutely incredible when they go.
And what they did, I mean,
but let's
Airborne.
get back. Yeah, let's get back and let's talk about the Airborne. So if you look all the way, let's throw the map up that we have on the screen right quick. Sorry, we may be talking about a map that you guys can't see.
But
we'll
the
throw that
Airborne
up.
Division, now keep in mind, this was the early days still of Airborne.
No, this is the,
of Airborne. I mean, Airborne had been around, but it had never really been
Actually,
used.
the Germans had been very successful with it,
They were using
especially their
the
landing on Crete.
Yeah, the Blitzkrieg, but for
And
the
in Norway.
American Airborne, this was really
Testified
to say, like, hey, this is a viable thing. And we had our 2 airborne units, the 101st Screaming Eagles, Easy Company, and
the
82nd Airborne Division, All-American. Now, do you know why they're called All-American?
No, I do not.
The 82nd Airborne was the first division at the time where they had at least one member from all 50 states of the Union at the time.
That was pretty impressive because we only had 48 states at the time.
Well, territory Hawaii. So we had, you get the point that we're going. That's why they were.
I love stumping him. Although it's
anyways,
too easy
technical
sometimes.
Anyways, we had representation
so
there.
You can see how they flew in, and they intentionally flew them in from the west side of that peninsula that stuck out.
Now, here's also
to the west of Normandy.
They were supposed to launch on June 4th, but due to weather,
I didn't know that.
Yes, and it's depicted in the movie.
Yeah,
you know, the landing was supposed to take place on June 4th. There was a reason why, because on June 7th, it was going to be a full moon. They still did not have moon cover, and they wanted to drop without any light for obvious,
as little light as possible.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So
you can see how they dropped in. And one of the things the Band of Brothers does a great job of is telling the story of what a tactical disaster it was. They got separated. The anti-aircraft fire was a lot thicker than they thought.
Yep.
Once basically they used radios, the Germans did, and once they realized they were coming in, everybody was awake and alert and ready. But it didn't change the fact the Marines love to use the gunny highway term, improvise, adapt, and overcome. There is probably not a better tactical example of this. Literally putting together on the fly small units, as everybody was lost. Everybody was in the wrong place. And
soldiers are losing weapons. I mean,
NCOs and junior officers taking over, basically assembling platoons, squads and platoons on the fly, continuing the mission, continuing to attack. Generally, the attack plan was the same. There were specific bridges that they were going to try to seize. There were towns that they were going to try to occupy. But here's the thing. They were so lightly armed, they could not hold for long.
No.
And this is the story that is told in the miniseries, The Band of Brothers. And I tell you what, I don't think there is a better way to understand that than to watching. And again, when we talk about Tom Hanks, we talk about Steven Spielberg, the incredible work that they do. But I'll throw in something else.
What's that?
And unlike a lot of Hollywood, and I think about specifically The Big Red One. No, excuse me, that was a movie with Lee Marvin. read something, and it was shot about the Pacific War, but basically
The Thin Red Line?
Yes, the Thin Red Line.
Right.
Thank you. The political overtones of that movie. I got 10 minutes. It's one of the few war movies I never finished. I just
You
said,
didn't
know what?
miss much.
Screw this guy. This guy is trying to. But what? And this is the difference when what Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg do. It is not political at all.
They tell the
are
story.
telling the story. Yeah, exactly.
And what it is. And when you look at Band of Brothers and also Saving Private Ryan, you got to understand, war is hell. And
War is hell.
they showed that. They depicted that. And what I loved about Band of Brothers is it tells also the personal insight of war, of how soldiers, the love for one another, and the trials. I mean, remember, Easy Company, they started them from when they started their airborne training in Georgia all the way through the final surrender in Germany at the end of the movie. And some of the men that were there from the beginning to the end, the stories are incredible. But one of the things that I really like, it's not really depicted in the movie. It came out years later. When Major Dick Winters died, I loved what he and his family did for his death. He died in a small little town outside of Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, Western PA. He made a promise to all the local media that when he passed, no media coverage about his funeral for 10 days. And upon, after the funeral, because he wanted his family to bury him with peace, because he knew after the movie it was going to be a circus.
Right.
He had a private personal journal of all the activities and all the events that happened over in World II. He would give that over to all the local media for them to use to publish.
Wow.
How, I mean, if you're the editor of a paper in that hometown, do you keep that story quiet for 10 days to have that?
That would be very difficult to do.
Yes, but think of the reward you got out of that.
So, you know
I
what?
like that.
This is a great way to take we're going to segue slightly, but it's extremely important and extremely relevant. We still have more than a few World War II, Korean War, and we are losing our Vietnam veterans. But if you have a parent or a grandparent, and we have the power literally at our fingertips, literally in our smartphones, sit down with them over a cup of coffee or a glass of bourbon or whatever it is you do. Or a donut, yes. And actually, especially if it's right about now and National Donut Day. But just start to talk to them about their experiences. And, you know, not all of it's combat.
No.
Some of the greatest experiences in the military are silly stuff that we did, the silly stories, the people that we knew. But get them, capture those stories. And there's an organization, it's the Sons and the Daughters of World War II Veterans. And I believe they're based in Fredericksburg, Texas. I think.
Wouldn't
I'm not
surprise me.
100%.
That would sound very accurate.
And for those who don't know, and we'll talk about this more next week, we're going to talk about Chester Nimitz. He is from Fredericksburg. Fascinating. One of the better museums is the Museum of the Pacific War down there that is dedicated to H. Bush, who is literally a hero of the War of the Pacific, the youngest naval aviator in naval aviation history. But capture those stories because those stories are getting lost. And this is an organization that will help you archive those stories so that future generations, we have the ability to record this for future generations. So they have, and you build a deep, deep appreciation. And there is a political agenda that I am operating under. Because I think the greatest thing about the military is it bringing, as you were saying, the All-Americans, they had representatives from every state, you know, all 57 of them. Oh, sorry, that was a little bit of a political shot, wasn't it? But what it does, the military does, is it brings together people with a common mission from all over our country, and that common mission is greater than the individual. And you know what?
Down.
95% of veterans buy into that hook, line, and sinker to the point we will literally write a check with our own lives.
No question. And that was shown all over the battlefields of World War II, especially in Normandy. I mean, the amount of personal sacrifice and what things these men and women did for one another to make sure they're there. I mean, you just read the stories of all these landings. Per se, I mean, the medics that were on the beach at Normandy.
Oh my
and
gosh,
the
yes.
things that they said and done to.
Nobody. I think nobody is more revered than the medics in the Army and the corpsmen in the Navy.
Oh,
in fact, the
hands
Navy
down.
corpsmen, if you are an FMF corpsman, you are considered. And
I was
the
gonna
FMF
say-
corpsmen are deployed with the Marines. They are a specific group, and if you're an FMF corpsman, you are considered
I was
a
going to say
Marine.
they're the only non-Marines considered Marines,
Yep.
and it's probably okay to call yourself a Marine if you're because you guys call them docs. That's their
we call them
official
docs,
term,
yeah.
right? And that is a term of endearment.
unofficial term, but
Unofficial, you know.
an absolute term of endearment. I
And-
had one Navy doctor. I called him Doc, and he got all bent out of shape. I didn't use his rank, and I was like, "You really don't understand that's a term of respect, do you, sir?"
But
With all the
listen,
sarcasm I could drip, and he knew it. It was one of those, he couldn't do a damn thing about it. But
it is true. I mean, the medics on the battlefield. You know, there's a great idea for a movie that Tom Hanks feel we should do is the medics on the battlefield of some of these great engagements. I mean, the
you know
story.
why you can't do a movie about them?
Why is that?
Their survival rate was horrid. Oh my gosh, the medics, I think of any MOS, and military occupational specialty
Probably.
that you have, probably
Them and the
had
commo
in
guy.
combat. Those in comm guys. You take out the comm guys and you can't communicate. But the medics, yeah, they were popular targets. Very, very popular
Having
targets.
that red cross on your arm and helmet doesn't help.
Does not help at all. That's why most of them went around armed.
Yep.
They weren't doctors. They didn't swear an oath to do no damage.
Yep, and like I said, incredible. I mean, and you hear all the stories of it. I mean, you had the 34th Infantry Division, the Bloody Bucket, as they were known, the Pennsylvania National Guard.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a National Guard crew.
Yep.
See, even the Marine knew that.
There's countless amount of stories of heroism, courage. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt's son, who earned his
You
Medal
just
of Honor.
stole my thunder. Earned it on the, I believe, on the beach in Omaha.
On Omaha, he took the
Omaha.
4th Infantry Division over with cane. He took he had a broken leg, went up there with a cane and crutches, and took the beach and was given orders as a brigadier general. He said, "To hell with y'all." And he motivated his
He
men.
was not going to. He was going to lead from the front. He was not going to leave his troops behind.
And I said he's just one of many, many examples of just sheer bravery, guts, determination. That, you know what, come hell or high water, we're going to take this beach, and they did.
And I got to look because I have no idea where we are time wise. We've already gone way over.
We've exceeded. But you know what? I talked to JP about it before the show started. That today was going to go a little bit long, and you have to because you can't talk about D-Day in the time period we have, and of course you always have to add the fact that we have countless amounts of tangents on our show. You know, another great unit they talk about is the 8th Airborne or the 8th Air Force. All of they changed the landscape with all the bombs they dropped on Normandy.
Absolutely.
And to this day, if you were to fly over there, you could see all the craters over the top. If you take a drone footage, seeing there's a great.
And this shows where the different divisions were landing, how they were landing. And it's really interesting. So as I'm looking at it, you would think that the farthest west, the 4th Infantry Division, would have been the one that would have been assigned to turn to Brest. But in fact, it was the 29th Infantry Division, which landed at Omaha Beach.
Like I said, the battle, the fighting, another unit that people don't talk about, the 1st U.S. Special Operations, the U.S. Canadian Commandos.
Indeed.
The Devil's Brigade.
The Devil's Brigade.
Yep. I mean, there's countless amounts of units that their history and their lineage of this battle, we know them in American history and, of course, as military members, what these units did.
And we're kind of history nerds, so we kind of get into that stuff.
So much went on. Do you know who was the landing commander of Eisenhower was the supreme commander, but do you know which officer was the
I have no idea.
Montgomery.
Speaking of narcissistic, did I say that?
Hey, let's face it.
Did I say that out
when you
loud?
get the title of Field Marshal,
Yeah, this is true.
It's kind of hard not to be a little bit narcissistic.
But part of that is poor Monty, his poor ego, and every time he turned around, Patton was doing something better than he was, and he just couldn't come to accept who he was. But you know what? If we're going to throw out generals like that, I want to throw out now. Granted, this was a general who was not a big fan of the Marines, but I guess I can forgive him because he was such an outstanding general, and we can forgive everybody for being a bit of a dumbass. As Red would say, you dumbass. But Omar Bradley, the absolute personality opposite of Patton. A soldier. He was unassuming, but he was brilliant. And Patton was bold and realized, and as a cavalryman, which is how Patton got started as a cavalryman, and he applied cavalry tactics to tanks, and rightfully so. But his ego often got the best of him. And it's unfortunate, and speaking of books, although I don't have an autographed copy of this one of the best series of books written is the Killing series done by Bill O'Reilly. And you can see how congested in the picture the beach was. And this is just one beach. Keep in mind, we landed on a 50-mile front. And every beach eventually looked like that. I want to say this is day 2.
Probably.
Day 2 or day 3. But to finish
I'm going to go with day 2 just because the balloons were not fully up yet.
Killing Patton is an excellent look at who Patton was. And one of the nice things about the books, they're short reads, which I kind of favor. I hate the big, thick history books.
You prefer books with more pictures, less words?
Exactly. And if they've got places where I can fill in with crayon, I'm even happier.
There you go. And a little snack while you're eating.
Yeah,
right?
there we go. But Killing Patton was a great look at Patton's life. And the interesting thing, Patton's death, Patton scared the Russians to death.
Oh, no question.
They hate it. And they still to this day wonder if it is actually the Russians who had him killed.
Yep. Here's the thing. Do you know who wrote the screenplay for the movie Patton?
I have no idea.
Omar Bradley.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. I have to say, there was a lot I liked about that movie. Oh, there we go. Killing Patton. Great book by Bill O'Reilly. I do have several of the Killing series signed, but not that one, but that's okay. If I couldn't get
Bill
it signed
O'Reilly,
by...
if you're listening, Chuck wants one. He's paying top dollar for these books. Please send an autographed copy. First edition only.
If Riley finds out somebody's paying top dollar, I'll get a phone call on that one. It is a great money-making venture, and Bill O'Reilly is, in fact, a historian. Yep. And it's interesting. If you want to read a great book about dropping the atomic bomb, it's Killing the Rising Sun, which is a big focus of the book. And O'Reilly credits him being here with his father not being involved because his father was part of that, although he was in the Navy. So he probably would have been relatively safe just as a percentage call.
Because by that point, the Japanese Navy was pretty well beat up.
They were pretty beat up, but the kamikaze tactics were incredibly effective.
Yes, they were.
So
and
we'll talk about that.
We got to do that on a show one day.
That's yet another idea for a show, but we're at a point we probably really should wrap this up. This is the anniversary of D-Day. This was what most people credit with the start of the fall of Adolf Hitler. Mm-hmm. A historian can make arguments of a lot of other points, but that's as good a one as any. But the history, the stories of bravery, and the one thing I want to leave, and I want to go out with this.
What's that?
You mentioned Teddy Roosevelt's son, David, I believe.
No, Teddy Jr.
That's right, it was Teddy Jr.
Yes, it was.
So, one of 2 father and son teams to earn the Medal of Honor.
If you're going to challenge me who the other one was, I know it.
Oh, yeah, we've already done this on the show. That's an easy one. But it was...
MacArthur.
Arthur and Douglas MacArthur. Mm-hmm. So an interesting 2 significant players in the in World War II. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about Teddy Sr.'s is he received it for the during the Spanish-American War, but it wasn't awarded until well after his death, which unfortunately is becoming more and more common.
Yep.
So,
we're wrapping up the show over here. This was part 1 of military history. We're dropping knowledge bomb or dropping knowledge warheads on foreheads. That is going to be our new
Warheads on foreheads. I like that.
I like it. Which was the battle slogan for the 8th Air Force during the D-Day.
Did not know that.
So
Very
had
cool.
to throw that out there. All righty. Next week, tune in for more stories of that. We're going to talk about the Army's birthday and Battle Midway. For Chuck and I, going to say hoorah and hoorah. See you all next time. JP, if you wouldn't mind,